Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Society of Adaptation Professionals Private Sector Climate Service Providers Academy. My name is Rachel Jacobson. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as Deputy Director of American Society of Adaptation Professionals, or ASAP. I'll be your guide for the first part of our session today. And I am speaking to you today from Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is the lands of the Anishinaabe and Wyandot peoples, and specifically the Potawatomi. So here we are today on day one of our Climate Service Providers Academy. We'll be in this Zoom room together for 2 hours until 3 p.m. Eastern Time today. And today we're going to be focusing on collaboration for better climate services. All right, so here we are at our orientation for the Academy as a whole. Um, and here's a description of what we're going to do together today. So again, here we are at our orientation. Um, After our orientation, we are going to get into small groups where you'll have a chance to introduce yourself a little bit more in depth to a group of people. In the meantime, if you'd like to share with us in the chat who you are and say hello, you are more than welcome to do that. Then we will have an opening presentation from ASAP Executive Director Dr. Deborah Butler, where we'll be giving an introduction to ASAP, to adaptation professionals, and to climate service provision. We'll take a short break, and then we're really privileged to hear from our keynote presenter starting at around 2 o'clock, Julian Reyes from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and the U.S. Global Change Research Program. He'll be speaking on empowering communities with actionable climate information and services. And then we'll be transitioning to an introduction to our regional climate data and information partners. So we'll hear some brief words of welcome from Sean Bath from the NOAA Climate Adaptation Partnerships Program. And then we'll hear from our incredible list of climate data and information partners as they give a short introduction to each of their institutions and centers. And then we will be wrapping up and sharing with you some information about what you can expect at our upcoming sessions. All right, so we have 4 learning objectives for you today. Our first objective is about gaining understanding about who the different actors are in the climate services marketplace. The second 2 objectives are about making sure that you gain familiarity with the Academy host institutions, what they can provide both inside and outside of the Academy context to really set you up for success, not just within this training, but going forward into the future. And then our fourth objective is about being exposed and sort of gaining some new perspectives on the benefits and opportunities of prioritizing collaboration in the context of climate services, and especially collaboration across sectors. So we're so excited to be learning with you. And of course, today's session is just part of the wonderful learning opportunity that we have planned for you over the course of the next several weeks. So let's just quickly review the Academy components as a whole. So we have, I'm going to get this right, 8 sessions total for the Academy between now and November 28th. And you are, of course, welcome to attend each and every one of those sessions, and we would love to see you at each and every one of those sessions. If receiving a certificate of completion is important to you, we will ask that you be sure to attend today, our opening session, as well as next Tuesday's session on Principles of Quality Climate Adaptation Practice, at least one of our 5 regional sessions, and then our closing session on November 28th. And if you, we will be sending out recordings and materials from each of our sessions following in the 1 to 2 weeks following the session. And so if you aren't able to attend a particular session, you will be able to review those materials following. All of our sessions will take place over Zoom. That's the Zoom room that you're here now. And you should have a calendar invitation with the Zoom link for each of our subsequent sessions. And then I want to extend a very, very warm invitation to join us on Slack. And the link to the Slack channel is going to be coming around in the chat right now. If you haven't joined it yet, you can click this link. You'll be prompted to join the 2023 Climate Service Providers Academy channel. And we're going to be sending messages here in between sessions to support networking and continued conversation throughout the several weeks that we will be learning together. We also have a series of worksheets that you're invited to complete in between sessions to extend your learning. And this is a great opportunity not only to extend your own learning, but also to bring in other colleagues into the Academy space by discussing the worksheets with them in between sessions. Those worksheets are optional, but we invite you to take a look at them, complete them, bring other colleagues into them, again, to kind of extend the impact of your learning. And the link to the worksheet that you received prior to this session is coming around in the chat right now. All right. So again, hopefully folks have had a chance to join Slack and join the Slack channel for the 2023 Academy. And I just want to give a brief overview of how to use Slack if folks are not familiar with this. So you'll see a list of channels on the left-hand side. You want, of course, the 2023 Climate Service Providers Academy channel. And in there, from that channel, you can message everyone at once. You can also send a direct message to individuals. And so you'll see here in the pop-out on the screen, an instruction of how to click the compose direct message button to message an individual if you'd like to do that. That's a lot of things. It's a lot of components that we have to promote shared learning. And so things could get confusing. We hope that they don't, but they might. If you need support today in this Zoom session, please send a private Zoom message to Megan Putnam. And Megan, if you want to give a wave or a hello in the chat, that'll be great. Overall, if you need support in between sessions, or you simply just want to email someone, an email is your preferred form of getting support, you should send an email to Eliza Garcia, ASAP's program coordinator, and we'll send her email address around in the chat as well. All right, I am going to briefly go over some norms and expectations for our time together in this virtual space. The first is be present. And in particular, we invite you to keep your video on. Today, we are going to have a lot of frontal presentations, but we'll have one small group activity. So in particular, in that small group activity, if you're able to have your camera on, that's wonderful. But also, if you need to turn your camera off, walk around, take a screen break, that's okay too. Whatever works for you to remain present in our space. Take care of yourself. We've included a break in the middle of each session for you to step away from your screen, but don't hesitate to take extra breaks if you need them. Take care to respect others. At ASAP, we work to embody the values of trust and transparency. We're going to be upholding Chatham House rules. So that means that things that you share, perhaps in a small group session or even in a large group session, folks will take that learning with them and might share those ideas outside this room, but will ask your permission before attributing them to you. And of course, that goes for each of us. And then another part of respecting others is muting when you're not speaking. We're going to be in Zoom meeting format for our entire virtual course together, and that allows us to maximize our tools for interacting with one another. But that means that we are relying all on each and every one of you to stay muted when you're not speaking, so that we can minimize distractions and background noise. All right, so before we move into our introductions, I just want to really call attention to the enormous diversity of folks that are in this room. So this chart gives us a sense of where participants are providing climate services. We have folks providing services in all of the regions represented in the Academy and across North America. And there are so many regions represented that I couldn't even choose a set of colors that matched our color scheme for this slide deck, because that's just how great the geographic diversity is here. And we're really excited to have a chance to learn across all of those spaces. Of course, this is the Private Sector Climate Service Providers Academy, and so the plurality of folks who are in this room are from the private sector, which is amazing, but we also have an incredible opportunity to learn across sectors from folks in the nonprofit, academic, and public sectors as well. Okay, we're getting to the end of this speech, but I am getting to one of the most important parts, which is, of course, acknowledgments and thank yous. I want to have a chance to introduce our instructor and support team. So on that team, from ASAP, we have our executive director, Deborah Butler, myself, Rachel Jacobson, Mia Dozier, our training specialist, Eliza Garcia, our program coordinator, and Megan Putnam, our program assistant. And we're also really grateful to be joined by Jim Fox from NEMAC Fernleaf, who will be facilitating a few of our sessions and who has been a longtime supporter and co-designer of the Academy. And then last but certainly not least, I want to extend an enormous thank you to NOAA's Climate Adaptation Partnerships, formerly RESA program, for providing the financial support to make this Academy possible. And to our regional climate data and information partners, you're going to hear more from them later in the session. But we are so grateful to have you with us, to be sharing your wisdom, to have reached deep into your networks, to bring in case study presenters to share their wisdom. And we really, truly couldn't do this without you. So thank you so much. And finally, I want to extend a thank you to a specific thank you to Great Lakes Integrated Sciences and Assessments, who provided the seed funding for us to build this academy beginning in 2019, as well as Adaptation International, another key co-designer of the academy. All right, and with that, we're going to move into small groups where you'll have a chance to introduce yourself to other participants and share what you hope to get from the Academy and what you hope to give. So hopefully you can see on the screen a set of prompts for these introductions, and Eliza is going to send those around in the chat as well, so they will go with you when you enter your small group. And really hope that you'll share on both of these items, what you hope to give and what you hope to get from the Academy at ASAP. We really try to live into the value of reciprocity. And so with that, as soon as our breakout rooms are ready and our prompts are in the chat, we will enter those rooms. All right, and you should have received a prompt to enter a breakout room, so please feel free to go there now. And if you need any support, just speak up. Feel free to unmute and let us know. We'll get you where you need to go. Welcome back, everyone. Let me just reshare my screen here. Okay. Oh, such an amazing group of folks. I'm really excited about how we've been able to grow the Academy. And that is a great segue into what we're going to do next. Well, let me go back just one second. So I'm going to provide just a short introduction to American Society of Adaptation Professionals for folks who are joining us for the first time. And a little bit about the history of the Climate Service Providers Academy, how we got here today, and kind of what it means. And that's going to form the backdrop for us to hear from our executive director, Dr. Deborah Butler, on what that means in the context of providing climate services and being climate service providers. So here we go. ASAP, we are a professional association and social impact network for climate adaptation and climate resilience professionals. Our network has close to 1,000 individuals and 45 organizations, and members come from all sectors. You can see that diversity represented here on the pie chart. We're about evenly split between academic, nonprofit, for-profit, and public sector. And we have folks from all across North America, primarily concentrated in the US, but a growing membership in the Caribbean as well as in Canada. And together with our members and partners, we are advancing the field of climate change adaptation by learning from Western science, Indigenous knowledge, and the lived experience of people addressing climate impacts in their communities. And we are really privileged to have just an incredible group of organizational members. It includes federal agencies, cities, leading engineering and planning firms, and community-based organizations who provide invaluable support to the ASAP network, advance the adaptation field in their own right, as well as through our network, and receive support from the network to advance their adaptation and resilience goals. And if you are interested in organizational membership at ASAP, we welcome you to reach out. We've put a link in the chat where you can learn more about that. Here at ASAP, we have 3 program areas, and all of our programs are designed to build the capacity of our members to do effective adaptation work and work together to strengthen the field. And those 3 program areas are network support and peer learning, where folks come together in over 12 peer learning groups monthly, as well as a host of opportunities to connect both in real time and asynchronously to meet new people and explore new ideas. We have technical assistance and capacity building, where we are working in a variety of settings to catalyze adaptation action with communities and organizations on the ground, and a growing education and workforce development program where we both are working to define and develop the adaptation workforce, as well as help folks excel in their current jobs, find new opportunities, and gain professional education in the adaptation resilience space. And so our academy is simultaneously a professional education opportunity as well as an opportunity for peer learning, as we just were able to show in our small groups. And so I hope you'll really be able to experience both of those things fully throughout the course of your time with us over these next 6 weeks. So what is the Academy? How did we get here? So ASAP and our partners at GLISA and Adaptation International developed the Private Sector Climate Service Providers Academy beginning in 2019 to address the need to increase the level of practice in private sector companies, particularly around the use of publicly available, regionally relevant climate data and information, and apply vetted principles, strategies, and approaches for quality climate adaptation practice. And at that time, we were seeing an enormous growth in private sector companies entering the adaptation and resilience marketplace. Now, flash forward to 2023, and the growth continues to accelerate. More and more communities and businesses are working with private sector firms to obtain the climate services necessary to understand their risks and develop and implement adaptation strategies. And so it's more critical than ever before to support companies in accessing and using climate data and information, as well as those vetted strategies and approaches for adaptation work. And many of the challenges have remained consistent since we began this work. Challenges like being able to bridge the language gap across that different folks in different sectors are using to describe what's needed for adaptation and resilience. Challenges around centering justice and equity and ensuring that the processes and impacts of our work are really centering those most affected by climate impacts and contributing to transforming society away from oppressive systems that inhibit otherwise capable communities from thriving. Avoiding maladaptation. Adaptation is necessary, but doing it right is not a given, and it's difficult to avoid unintended negative consequences. Managing political swings. Right now, we have strong public funding for climate work, but we also have to create social infrastructure to sustain the provision of equitable and effective climate services, regardless of the political climate. And of course, the private sector is critical for that. And then overcoming new business challenges. This is still an emerging marketplace, and businesses of all sizes experience challenges trying to get a foothold in that marketplace. And we really believe that we can simultaneously have healthy competition in the marketplace and come together as a network to support collaboration for better outcomes. And we're going to be getting into a lot of those challenges over the course of the next several weeks. But I just want to note, like, a lot has changed since 2019. We continue to see growth in the marketplace, supported in large part by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and to some extent by the Inflation Reduction Act. But it's important to acknowledge that adaptation resilience work remains underfunded. But more and more communities and businesses are working with private sector firms to get the services they need. And we've evolved the Academy to meet both the conditions that businesses are experiencing as well as feedback from our participants and ASAP members. And so this year, we're really excited to bring you, not only new skills for accessing and applying climate data and information from public climate data and information providers, but also private climate data information providers covering both Western and non-Western knowledge perspectives. And we're excited to be expanding the Academy to cover several regions, the Great Lakes, South Central, Caribbean, North and Mid-Atlantic, California, and Nevada. Whereas in previous years, we were only covering up to 3 regions. We're so excited to be bringing you not just sophisticated knowledge and relevant examples of strategies and approaches for high quality adaptation practice, but really putting affected communities at the center of those conversations and examples. And not only connecting you to complementary businesses and potential partners and collaborators, but this year focusing in on specific industries, design, construction, architecture, engineering, and planning, to really bring you targeted opportunities in those spaces. So really excited to be kicking off this learning with you. And with that, we have, of course, an incredible slate of speakers and instructors, and I'm thrilled to welcome the first of those right now, Dr. Deborah Butler, ASAP's Executive Director. Dr. Butler is a native of the U.S. Gulf Coast in Mobile, Alabama. She earned a BA in anthropology, master's degrees in education and international business, and a PhD in environmental studies. Her transdisciplinary research collaborations intersect human climatic displacement and migration, native and indigenous knowledge systems, and ecological human quantum assemblages. Her career path has been transdisciplinary as well, including international positions with Delta Airlines, Merrill Lynch, and teaching at the college level and creating leadership development curriculum in nonprofit organizations. As a survivor of Hurricane Katrina and the BP Deep Horizon oil spill, she's collaborated with communities in developing plans and resources for climate resilience, adaptation, and mitigation for almost 20 years. She's certified by the Institute for Tribal Professionals in Tribal Hazard Mitigation Training and advocates for synergies and networks of praxis across professional, academic, economic, political, and cultural boundaries. Welcome, Deborah. And please do put questions in the chat for Deborah as she's speaking. We will compile those and take them at the end of the presentation.
Hello, everyone. I am really, really excited to be here today and to welcome you all to Climate Service Providers Academy and to the American Society of Adaptation Professionals. We have a wonderful program scheduled over the next 6 weeks for you. And it's a very interesting program in that it is both transdisciplinary and we hope transformative for you in your practice. Could you change slides, please? Next slide. So in ASAP's literature, we often say that an adaptation professional is anyone who's integrating information about future climate conditions in their day-to-day work. But we'd like to expand that definition just a bit and also introduce some other practices and some other perspectives to look at the way you do your work and how to transform that work into more intentional behavior. We remind you that adaptation is agile, that it changes all the time, and that as climate conditions change for the way we live and work, that adaptation and the way we approach adaptation practice must also be agile. Adaptation is behavioral. Adaptation is intentional. In my life, I found that, and in my practice, I found that adaptation is both transdisciplinary and transformative. We have 2 speakers today that are very representative of the way that there are synergies between adaptation practice, the data that of science and indigenous knowledge, and the way that synergized with collaborative climate services, which are climate driven. And those services, those relationships are restorative, respectful, reparative, and reciprocal. We hope that you will find and use those adaptation constructs in your work and the way you approach this particular academy experience. I remind you that time is not linear. Therefore, we work in iterative cycles and must be continuously adaptive in those cycles. And both from Dr. Reyes and from Dr. Bath, we're learning that this combination or this synergy is the best way to approach clients and the best way to do our work and the best way to transform whatever we do into behaviors that will have the best outcomes. Again, we remind you also that numbers are not the only way to tell stories and that community engagement is extremely important in your work. We hope that you find both our speakers today will explain how that works within the practice. And again, I welcome you and hope you find that this is a collaborative experience for both the work and the engagement that you have with our two speakers today. I'll entertain questions a little bit later, but for that, for the time being, welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. We are going to pause here and take any questions that folks might have. And I don't see any in the chat yet, but feel free to send them in. We'll pause for just a second. And I know we've covered a lot, but any questions that are coming up for you about will we get the slides? You will get the slides. Thank you, Alice. Anything about the Academy structure, anything about from Deborah's words of welcome, from the Academy history and what you can expect. Thanks for that question, Rachel. The geographical spread of ASAP's members. So our members are concentrated in the US. We have a sprinkling of members in Canada and a growing membership in the Caribbean. We have kind of the strongest presence in terms of states in California as well as in Michigan. And then in terms of cities, the greatest number of ASAP members are in the Washington, D.C. metro area. And then we have, yes, that is, I'm trying to think if there are any other notable pockets. And we do have, I believe, members currently in 49 US states and territories. Yep, all the sessions will be recorded and we can access them later. Yeah, thank you for that question, Meredith, about what sectors the Academy has emphasized in the past. So in the past, we've actually not chosen an industry focus. And so we've had folks from a wide variety of industries. And we do have folks from a wide variety of industries here today as well. But for us, it kind of represents a little bit of a narrowing. It's what we're focusing our case study presentations on, and it's where we've been able to recruit the most folks in from. And the reason for that is just noticing in the marketplace where the most need is, as well as the greatest opportunity. We see so many design, architecture, and engineering firms in particular with really strongly growing climate services lines and adaptation and resilience practices. And so that's why we focused our efforts here this year. And in the past, we've really kind of been industry neutral in our approach. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, yes, and everyone will be receiving materials packages for each session, which will include, any written materials that we shared, the finalized slide deck, as well as the recording. All right, so feel free to keep the questions coming. We'll be here, but we are going to go on about an 8-minute break. So I want to invite folks to stay logged in and turn off their camera and their microphone, stretch, use the restroom, grab a drink. We will be coming back at 1:55 p.m. Eastern Time, or 7 minutes from now. So we'll see you soon. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I am really pleased now to turn over the facilitation of this session to ASAP's training specialist, Mia Dozier.
Hi, everyone. It's so amazing to be in community with you all today. And Rachel, thank you for facilitating the first part of the session. Really honored just to be in the position to be able to share with you the rest of what's in store for us. So during the rest of our session, we'll be hearing from some really exciting Academy partners. And with this, I just want to remind you all to make sure to use the chat to capture questions and your exciting comments and add them to the mix of this conversation as we go. I know you're hearing a lot from us today, but we also want to hear from you. So feel free to, speak your mind in the chat. And with this, I want to highlight that there will be keynotes, case studies, and real world examples using climate data information highlighted throughout the Academy. And focusing on Keystone individuals and private sector companies that are working with climate data and information, it's my honor to introduce Dr. Julian Reyes. Dr. Julian Reyes is Assistant Director for Climate Services at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and Deputy Director for Services at the U.S. Global Change Research Program. He's on loan from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where he served as the National Coordinator for the USDA's Climate Hubs program. From that position, he brings broad experiences in co-creating actionable, decision-relevant climate resources with stakeholders and the public to help manage climate risks. Prior, Julian was an AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow at the U.S. Department of State in their Climate Change Office. He also spearheaded development of the Ag Risk Viewer, a new platform to provide accessible and discoverable crop insurance loss data. Julian earned both his BS and PhD in civil engineering from Washington State University.
Thank you, Mia. I appreciate that introduction. Let me share my screen. We planned this out, I promise. And then I think you all can see my screen. Thumbs up, maybe. Great. Thanks again for this opportunity. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you again, ASAP staff and team, for this opportunity. I'm very excited to talk to you all about the administration's progress and efforts on actionable climate science and services to empower communities with local decision-relevant information and products. And that was a great bio, Mia, but what I really learned from my time in this space was really how to break down silos and work collaboratively, and also listening and learning from our partners and our stakeholders. And I think that's the one thing that I've really valued from my current role, and that I impart upon you all, is to listen and learn. And that's how I've grown, but also this is how I'm able to be a champion for much of the work. And a lot of the work I'll present to you today is really what people have done through the interagency and not my own work. But I hope that together we can progress and show our efforts in partnership between federal and non-federal partners and federal climate service providers and users. So past and robust sustained federal investments in climate science and data have provided foundational knowledge that allows us to understand the changes currently underway and to anticipate those to come. However, the urgency of the climate crisis demands the federal government and our partners both to deliver new knowledge about key unknowns, but also to provide existing knowledge and information to the public and decision makers so that that existing knowledge is useful, usable, and used. That latter goal depends upon the provision of what are called climate services, defined during this talk as scientifically based information and products that enhance users' knowledge and understanding about the impacts of climate change on potential decisions and actions. These services are made most effective and useful through collaboration between information providers and users. The development and provision of usable climate services will enhance planning across timescales from weeks to decades into the future, and to inform and support both mitigation and adaptation actions. Executive Order 14008 or Section 211D called for the expansion and improvement of the nation's climate information products for the public. In response to this directive, the federal government developed a vision and recommended actions for the future direction of federal climate services. Central to that vision is the ambition to provide every American, every community, and every business with access to useful and usable climate services. And by that, I mean climate data, information, tools, and technical assistance. The National Science and Technology Council, or NSTC, stood up a Fast Track Action Committee, or FTAC, on climate services, and this provides an action plan and an operational framework in response to Executive Order 14008. The FTAC released a federal framework and action plan for climate services this past March. This report featured on the right side, and the report lays out recommendations and pathways to further recognize the entire climate services value chain, from development of data to science translation, delivery through cooperative extension, for example, highlighting both producers and users of federal climate services. I wanted to note the membership of the FTAC was made up of many departments and agencies that you will recognize here. And the importance of that is that to showcase that there's a wide range of federal agencies involved in climate services, and they exist across the entire federal family. And each agency brings something of value on conversations around climate information and services. And my job at the White House is to be a champion for all agencies and to lift all boats as we move forward on more ambitious and coordinated federal climate services to really reduce the burden upon users to find and access our information, and also to ensure that the federal government behind the doors, really, it's a seamless, no wrong door policy when thinking about how to access our information. I'll also note that the FTAC was co-chaired by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, NOAA, and FEMA. This is a really important time. We have a lot of opportunities at the moment. We have unprecedented White House and agency commitments to climate action. We have a rich portfolio of existing climate services, which the FTAC report highlights many of them. We have historic federal investments in infrastructure, resilience, research, and services through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. We also have a rapidly evolving technology for engaging users, including expanded and enhanced decision support tools. We also recognize numerous challenges. Existing services are incommensurate with user demand. Services are difficult to find, navigate, and there may be a mismatch in specific contextual applications. And we also recognize a lack of coordination on the federal side contributes to gaps, inconsistencies, and duplication of effort. So as part of the FTAC's work, we strove towards a common understanding of climate services. The Federal Framework and Action Plan identified key principles for effective climate services, and a common thread is engagement among both producers and users. I won't read those principles here, but they emphasize climate service delivery as an ongoing and iterative process that adapts in response to new scientific discoveries and the changing needs of users. So a robust system of climate services seeks to balance the demand with the supply of climate information. Too much emphasis on efforts to meet immediate user needs can lead to services becoming disconnected from the underlying science and analytic capabilities that really enable the delivery of credible information. However, too much emphasis on scientific advances can lead to services failing to be responsive to the needs of potential users. The FTAC also worked to ensure that climate services are not simply the provision of climate data. Instead, they are often the products of a knowledge value chain, the sequences of steps involved in producing information products for a customer or a user, and the recognition of end users, decision makers, and communities who help drive the dynamic feedback loops in this chain. And the primary inputs in the value chain are climate science or data, and the resulting data and information that are generated by that science and how they're used and evaluated. I will highlight a few steps in the chain and note some activities that you may be familiar with. Development of climate services. So the blue arrow refers to the synthesis and translation of scientific information to distill key findings and enhance the accessibility of information for different audiences. That development includes better understanding of user and stakeholder needs through knowledge co-production, listening sessions, and other forms of engagement. Delivery of climate services, in the blue, includes the dissemination and sharing of knowledge through specific products like portals and websites, and capacity building efforts like extension, training, and stakeholder workshops. But we need to do more than just recognize the value of climate services. Through our listening sessions with stakeholders and the deliberations of the FTAC, it was clear that the federal government must advance greater coordination of climate services. First, the federal government must scale up by building a stronger institutional foundation for the governance of climate services. We know that agencies are best positioned to understand the needs of their stakeholders and develop and deliver useful climate services. Yet a mechanism is needed to enhance interagency coordination and develop a shared whole of government strategy. This really elevates climate services from an ad hoc, opportunistic activity to one that's more deliberate, strategic, and a planned enterprise that is coordinated within and across the federal family. We know that this enhanced coordination will strive to meet the needs of the nation and reduce burden upon users to discover relevant climate data and products while reducing duplication of effort and/or competing or contradictory information. And this will be done through the U.S. Global Change Research Program, or USGCRP, to enhance that ambition and coordination of climate services. Second, the federal government can scale out climate services by expanding the communities of users it serves and improving the services it provides. By developing new partners, the federal government can contribute to a richer system of national and global climate services that enables action on climate change. And I'll mention a little bit more about partnerships with non-federal entities in the next few slides. The FTAC report also contains multiple recommendations around 4 general themes. The first is on user engagement and partnerships. The second is on governance. The third is on common infrastructure. And the fourth is on capacity building. The first theme focuses on enhancing engagement and partnership with federal and non-federal producers and users of climate services, including through a climate services forum, as well as enhancing public-private partnerships. The second theme strengthens governance, leadership, and coordination of federal climate services through the U.S. Global Change Research Program. The third theme discusses development of common infrastructure and processes for the development and delivery of climate services, including common platforms and system architecture. This could also include an inventory of climate service data, products, and tools. The final theme focuses on enhancing capacity of federal and non-federal partners, which includes evaluating the federal government's training and professional development needs with respect to agency capacity to effectively develop and deliver climate services. And this last specific recommendation could expand support for stakeholders in state, local, and tribal and territorial governments, as well as civic and boundary organizations. A major feature of the federal government's efforts to deliver climate services is in partnership with many non-federal organizations and through the use of regional applied science and service organizations that work with stakeholders to build understanding around information needs and then work to co-produce information that meets those needs. These include NOAA's Climate Adaptation Partnership, CAPRISAs, until you hear from them later today, the Climate Adaptation Science Centers, or CASCs, and the USDA's Climate Hubs. We also recognize new efforts such as NOAA's Climate Smart Communities Initiative and EPA's Regional Climate Assistance Network, or RCAN, through their new Integrated Climate Sciences Division. We recognize that continued investments in these regional organizations and exploration of their implementation to support other agency missions could enhance science translation that helps to bridge from federal data and capabilities to the implementation of solutions in specific locations. This effort also recognizes the importance of non-federal actors in the climate services space who often have critical links to federal agencies, but are also those trusted boundary organizations and partners. This community plays a critical role in both enhancing the dissemination of federal climate services and also bridging between federal services and the needs of local decision makers and practitioners. Now I'm going to shift a little bit and talk about the National Climate Resilience Framework. In June of this year, President Biden directed the creation of a first ever National Climate Resilience Framework to identify key values, priorities, and objectives to help expand and accelerate nationally comprehensive, locally tailored, and community-driven resilience strategies. The framework requires an all-hands-on-deck effort across all levels of government, leaders of all political backgrounds, and the wide range of philanthropic, nonprofit, academic, and private sector institutions to work with the federal government as an active, flexible, coordinated, and committed partner. The framework is also a foundation for near-term and longer-term climate resilience efforts across the federal government in coordination with non-federal partners. The framework has 6 core objectives. In addition to reimagining the federal government's role in advancing climate resilience, these 6 core objectives, supported by specific opportunities for actions, are critical to strengthening the nation's protections against the impacts of climate change. And these actions help make communities safe, healthy, equitable, and economically strong. And so that communities can and should be a focus of climate resilience efforts at all levels. And for this talk, I will focus on objective number 4 here, equipping communities with information and resources needed to assess their climate risks and develop the climate resilience solutions most appropriate for them. So for this particular objective, we understand there's no one-size-fits-all approach to building climate resilience. Communities experience climate change in different ways and respond according to their unique capabilities and cultures. Communities need evidence-based information, easy to use information, tools, and services. The US government is an authoritative source of climate information, data, and modeling with wide reach and resources, and is working alongside partners to develop and provide evidence-based and actionable resources. I do want to highlight some key progress and investments around this area. The first is the National Climate Assessment, the forthcoming one, which will provide a rich source of authoritative climate information across US regions and key sectors. The Climate Mapping for Resilience and Adaptation, or CAMRA portal, which I will also discuss, and the Sea Level Rise Viewer allows users to interactively explore climate hazards in their area, while the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, or CJUST, can guide investments in climate resilience by identifying disadvantaged communities likely to be disproportionately impacted by climate change, along with other environmental and socioeconomic burdens. Other items I'll mention here are the regional science and service organizations, which I mentioned, the NOAA CAPRISAs, the climate hubs, and the CASCs. And I'll also mention the first-of-a-kind Indigenous Knowledge Guide for federal agencies, which identifies promising practices for relationship building and knowledge co-production efforts. In terms of opportunities for action, this includes training additional translators who articulate and align climate science and data, including limitations and uncertainties in these data, and help communities identify and address their climate risks, vulnerabilities, and needs. These translators act as force multipliers for the federal government's resources, including funding opportunities, research, and decision support tools. Specific examples include cooperative extension and Sea Grant. Community engagement and participatory approaches, including culturally informed approaches, as well as co-production of data, tools, and solutions, are critical in ensuring that public programs aim to support climate resilience and are responsive to community needs. Federal agencies can advance appropriate and sustained community engagement around climate information, especially through the implementation of the Federal Framework and Action Plan for Climate Services. Supporting local and regional coordination amongst tribal, territorial, and indigenous communities, which can result in peer-to-peer learning and sharing of resilience and adaptation best practices. Examples include BIA's Regional Tribal Climate Resilience Liaison Program as a model of a federal program for effective coordination executed in partnership with and under the leadership of intertribal organizations. And shifting gears a bit now, I will go into a few specific tools that may be helpful to you. I mentioned CAMRA. This provides resources for multiple types of users, whether you're a local resilience planner, a program analyst, or just interested in climate impacts in the United States. At the heart of CAMRA is the assessment tool, which provides current and future climate hazard information to assist federal agencies and the recipients of federal funds with prioritizing, identifying, and implementing climate-informed infrastructure investments. As a single source of historical and future climate data, the portal offers information that can support the planning and implementation of climate-resilient projects down to the census tract level. CAMRA also offers links to federal funding sources, a rich collection of open data, and other applications for visualizing information. The information through CAMRA is intended to orient you to how these different resources can be used most effectively. The CAMRA tool does offer current and future exposure to 5 major climate-related hazards: extreme heat, drought, wildfire, flooding, and coastal inundation. The next, in November 2022, the White House Council on Environmental Quality, or CEQ, launched CJUST, which is an essential step in implementing the Justice 40 initiative and ensuring that the benefits of federal programs are reaching communities that are overburdened by pollution and historic investment. Through Executive Order 14008, CJUST was built. It's an interactive map and uses data sets that are indicators of burden in 8 categories: climate change, energy, health, housing, legacy pollution, transportation, water and wastewater, and workforce development. The tool uses this information to identify communities that are experiencing these burdens, and these are the communities that are disadvantaged because they are overburdened and underserved. Federal agencies will use the tool to help identify disadvantaged communities that will benefit from programs under the Justice 40 initiative. And as I mentioned, Justice 40 aims to deliver 40% of the overall benefits of investments in climate, clean energy, and related areas to disadvantaged communities. And my last slide here, I will mention this Indigenous Knowledge Guidance. In December 2022, CEQ and the White House and OSTP jointly released new government-wide guidance and an accompanying implementation memo for federal agencies on recognizing and including Indigenous knowledge in federal research, policy, and decision-making. Indigenous knowledge is a body of observations, oral and written knowledge, innovations, practices, and beliefs developed by tribes and Indigenous peoples through interaction and experience with the environment. The administration has formally recognized Indigenous knowledge as one of the many important bodies of knowledge that contributes to the scientific, technical, social, and economic advancements of the United States and our collective understanding of the natural world. Some best practices and principles to grow and maintain Indigenous knowledge include acknowledging the historical context and past injustice, early and sustained engagement, considering co-management and co-stewardship, and pursuing knowledge co-production. I highly recommend, if you're interested, to please take a look at this guidance and memo that was released to federal agencies. And with that, I think we have plenty of time for questions, and I welcome those, and I hope we have a great discussion. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much, Julian. Rachel, do you want to share your screen again?
Yes.
Perfect. Hey, as I said in the chat, as we approach the Q&A session, make sure to put all of your questions for Julian in the chat, and we'll be going through them one by one. Otherwise, feel free to use the raise your hand function in the Zoom, and we'll be calling on folks as they come in. So we have a question from Whitney. Whitney asks, Julian, how is CMRA different from NOAA sea level rise and coastal flooding viewers?
Great question. I'm not the camera expert, but I believe that camera does use some of the underlying data in the sea level rise viewer. And so that I believe that the underlying data related to sea level rise are very similar. Camera is a kind of an amalgamation of different federal data and resources acting as a one-stop shop. So I imagine they use the same underlying data. As a way to kind of not answer your question, but say something else, I will mention that camera will be updated with the latest NCA 5 projections into the near future. And so I believe that will be something that will be very useful to folks, especially thinking about using the latest and greatest climate data and science, especially looking at impacts.
Perfect. Thank you. Lorraine says, since we're talking about the built environment, have any of these federal resources addressed providing data appropriate for building energy models?
For models, I'm not specifically sure, but there are efforts through the Climate Smart Infrastructure Interagency Working Group, which is co-led by the Office of Management and Budget and the Climate Policy Office. And they have been working on a set of best practices and tools that are specifically related to the built environment, thinking about climate smart building investments. I will also mention that climate smart infrastructure is a broad definition. I think a recent memo that came out of OMB talks about climate smart investments in terms of the built infrastructure, but also natural infrastructure. And I'm happy to dig out that definition for you. If you shoot me an email, I can send that over. But there has been thought about specific tools for climate smart infrastructure, whether for the built environment or natural environment.
Perfect. All right, our next question comes from Ollie, who asks, how are these federal mapping tools incorporating local community knowledge, and how often will they be updated?
That's a great question. I would say so for camera and CGIS, I think those are more of a, like I mentioned, aggregation of existing data and tools. In the next year or so, and there will be an opportunity for stakeholder engagement to improve the usability and functionality of the tool. So that is a way to get community engagement. Another tool in our kind of federal ecosystem of climate change tools is the Climate Resilience Toolkit. And that also features case studies involving communities and how they're adapting, how they're mitigating, how they're building resilience. And that's a way to bring in that kind of grassroots efforts on climate change. And that should also be updated in the next year or so. I will also mention that the National Climate Assessment will produce an NCA 5 Atlas, which will also provide kind of county level, state level climate impacts information. And there should also be related case studies and stories with what communities are doing to respond to climate change in that as well. And all these different tools, are functioning in an ecosystem, right? And so one tool provides a unique capability to find certain data sets, yet, the Climate Resilience Toolkit provides more stories, for example. And so, it's not the perfect world with all these tools, but they do function together. And, we're always looking for feedback. And so if you have your own ideas on how we can better incorporate community voices, we welcome those.
Mhm. Great. Perfect. And just a heads up, everyone, we'll be taking questions until 2:25. So if we can't get to everyone, just know that we are taking all of your questions down in our own sort of data bank, and then we'll be getting back to you all on all of your questions. Don't think that we'd ever just ignore you. Okay, next question. Andrea says, thanks for your presentation, Dr. Reyes. Can you explain why CJUST doesn't include race? I get that question a lot from stakeholders.
I'm gonna have to punt on that. I'm not CEQ. They're the ones who delivered CJUST. I would look to the original language in the executive order that called for building CJUST. That may help explain the reasons for why they chose particular pieces of data. But that is something I can bring back. I do know that the CEQ team held numerous stakeholder listening sessions, not only with agencies, but with non-federal agencies. But I can't answer that question definitively. But I agree, that is a good question.
Right, our next question is from Brian. He asks, how does OSTP view the tension between public and private provision of climate services or data?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think it's necessarily a tension. I think if you look at the FTAP report, it's very open about, in terms of recommendation of building public-private partnerships to, around climate services, including data. There is even a recommendation around third-party data. And I think, throughout my presentation, I recognize the partnerships with non-federal entities. And so I don't think it's a tension, but rather a balance, kind of like the balance with kind of advancing science, but also stakeholder engagement. I see it also as a balance with, supporting our private partners in our endeavors who are also users of federal climate services. So I don't think it's necessarily a tension, but a balance. And I think the National Climate Resilience Framework also does a great job of showing how the federal government can be very flexible and an active partner with non-federal partners. And I think the National Climate Resilience Framework, it's a great document showcasing how federal government can be doing a better job in certain places. So I think that the federal government wants to remain flexible, be an active partner, but not necessarily a tension there. I think rather we're looking for opportunities to partner together.
Great, thank you. We have time for a few more questions. Leah says, are there plans to make the Indigenous Knowledge Guidance document into a more interactive website, site or resource?
That's a great question. I don't know. I think if that's a good suggestion to make it more accessible. Or yeah, I agree. It's right now just PDF. I can take that back. I think it's a great suggestion. I think it's a great document, but you're right. It's difficult to navigate it as a single PDF. I can take that back for sure.
Mm-hmm. We have another question from Andrea. Says, my understanding is that NOAA's Climate Smart Communities Initiative has changed since the NOFA was released a few years ago. Can you explain what this new program will do?
Yeah, I'm not the PI on the Climate Smart Communities Initiative, and you're right, it has changed a little bit. Maybe Sean can speak more, but we are working closely with David Herring, who's at NOAA, and I think is one of the co-PIs of or leading that particular initiative. But we do want to work closely with that initiative, given kind of the investment in working with communities and building up climate services and thinking about providers to those communities of information.
Perfect. Two more. Another question from Andrea. What will EPA's new Integrated Climate Sciences Division do?
Good question. So I'm really excited about what EPA is doing. So EPA, this new ARCAN network is essentially like the climate hubs, like the NOAA CAPRISAs, like the climate adaptation science centers, intended to be a bridge between what's happening at the federal level with what's happening on the ground. So I think they intend to provide climate science and impacts information to their regional offices and to work on more locally tailored adaptation planning and resourcing. It's a fairly new initiative, but it's very exciting that EPA has looked to the success of the CAPRISAs, the hubs, and the CASCs, and that it's a model that they are employing at the moment. And that's a model that I see that could potentially work for other federal agencies as well.
And this will be our last question from Katie Miller. It says, great to see the National Climate Resilience Framework published. It looks like it notes opportunities for action. Have any federal agencies or public and private sector partners committed to implementing these opportunities for action?
Yeah, great question. I know that the press release for the National Climate Resilience Framework mentions commitments. I think it's like 800 million from private partners for the National Climate Resilience Framework. Besides that, I have not heard about particular publicly announced commitments. I do know that the administration is working with federal agencies to think about how to actually implement what's in the National Climate Resilience Framework so that we're actually doing what we said we would do. But I do know there's also a lot of interest in, looking at these particular opportunities for action and actually implementing what those recommendations are.
Perfect. All right, and with that, we're closing our Q&A portion with Dr. Julian Reyes. If you all could join me in the chat and just thanking Dr. Reyes for being here and speaking today, that would be lovely. Dr. Reyes, thank you so much again. All right, and now we'll have a chance to hear from our CAP partners at NOAA, beginning with an introduction from Dr. Sean Bath. Perfect. So as we transition, I'm truly honored to give this introduction. Dr. Sean Bath is a scientist, program manager, and ultimately an adaptation partnership enabler at NOAA. Trained in interdisciplinary environmental studies, public administration, and planning, Sean has years of experience supporting many aspects of knowledge co-production and community engagement with Sea Grant, U.S. Navy, and NOAA. Welcome, Dr. Sean Bath.
Hi, and not a doctor, don't have a PhD actually, but my skills, no worries, my skill set. I think it was said earlier, and then it got carried along.
Yeah,
yeah, my skill set. I have a dual master's degree, and like the position where I'm bouncing around different knowledge sets. So I'll try to be brief because I think we have to get on to other things, but I'm really glad Julian went on before me and covered all the things that he did. I was having a little bit of last minute anxiety that we weren't covering a lot of these aspects of the broader ecosystem, and people have mentioned even other parts of it, like Extension and Sea Grant. There are a lot of organizations. This is a big tent effort out there to do climate services work. And I'll be telling you a little bit more about the Climate Adaptation Partnerships Program at NOAA, which formerly went by the name RISA. You may see that around as well, RISA. It's a legacy name for us, so we're often going by CAP RISA right now. But I'll tell you a little bit about ours because we have several partners involved in this project or involved in the Academy, regional leads, and we're have this important place with the Great Lakes team sponsoring the first Academy, as Rachel mentioned at the beginning. So let's go to the next slide. Next slide, not seeing it. Okay, there we go. So we as a program and network of teams have long been doing climate adaptation research and engagement with decision makers since 1995, believe it or not. So CAP or RISA started with a couple of pilot regional assessments focused on the use and application of climate forecast information in the 90s, first one taking place in the Pacific Northwest, with a focus on short-term climate variability and how that affects salmon fisheries. So from the beginning, the teams we funded incorporated the concepts of trusted relationships, credible science, and sustained partnerships. The CAP program was co-developed then in the early days of the U.S. Global Change Research Program, which is as lead for climate services and lead for the climate assessment. So that's a coordinating body of federal agencies supporting climate and global change research. We have continued to be embedded and contributing to both the National Climate Assessment and the U.S. Global Change Research Program. So the approach in the regions has always been very bottom up, where the topics, the project foci, and stakeholder engagement are determined through on-the-ground analysis of what is needed in the specific region that's covered. The topics and stakeholder groups vary depending on these factors. The following 2 decades saw the expansion of the number of teams up to now 13, and a stronger emphasis on integrating social and physical science methods with a heavy engagement approach. In recent years, the network has begun tackling the complex compound stressors, climate and socioeconomic, faced by communities, and has focused more attention on frontline communities in search of this type of expertise and partnership. Next slide. So if you're not familiar with us, we're part of the NOAA Climate Program Office, which is actually the same home office as the Climate Smart Communities Initiative. David Herring is a colleague, and like Climate Resilience Toolkit, where that's housed, and several other things. So the mission of the program is to advance equitable adaptation through sustained regional research and community engagement. The structure of our program is to support a network of regional teams through 5-year cooperative agreements in multi-state regions. The teams themselves, and as you will hear, are composed of researchers, specialists, and community partners covering several institutions and organizations across the region. These teams employ co-production of actionable knowledge with a variety of communities, decision makers, and organizations, where relationships are key. On the right is our ring graphic, which depicts the CAP process, including the establishment of trust between partners. Needs are defined by the community. Research is designed to meet the needs of the community. Participation happens by the community, is critical to success, and benefits are received by and useful to the community. It's with these actions and outcomes that novel climate solutions are developed. While you might be tempted to read the set of rings in a clockwise manner, it is actually more iterative, and all the rings connect to each other in a variety of ways. Next slide. So here's a map of our current network. There are 13 teams that make up the network, and they're the ones in solid polygon colors, including what may not be as apparent. The US Caribbean and the Pacific Islands are 2 teams. We hope to eventually have full national coverage, but in the absence of sufficient funding to invest in long-term teams, we've begun seeding activities in new regions. So that gets a little bit complicated, but there's these sort of grayed out regions or hollowed out regions, the Southeast and Upper Northeast, which actually those 2 regions, Southeast and Upper Northeast, are currently have a competition open for a CAP team. So many people are pulling together proposals right now, and letters of intent are due October 30th, I believe, but letters of intent are also not required. And we also, our other expansion region currently is Appalachia, where we're considering a few different things for how to expand in that area. We just launched in the Central Midwest. I'll drop the press releases for that work, as well as our bipartisan infrastructure work, just as an FYI. But we are very interested in filling out the rest of this map. And, if you're in that region, we'd love to talk to you and get a sense of what that region is like, because we hope to go there and get there eventually. But every team is on a 5-year cycle. So, we may, the time will come where every region is up for a competition. But in general, we're chucking along with our current proposals, which are very focused on equity. So I hope you'll get a little bit of a sense of that from the next few presentations, and also from the other non-CAP RISA partners that are involved in this.
Perfect. Thank you, Sean. And that was a beautiful segue into our next portion of the session, which is introducing all of our regional partners. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our folks at the University of Minnesota Climate Adaptation Partnership.
Thank you, Mia, and apologies. I don't know what happened to the slide here. I thought that I had updated the name of our organization to not be in white on the light gray background, but I'm Amanda Ferris. I am an associate director with the University of Minnesota's Climate Adaptation Partnership. We go by MCAP. Thank you, Eliza, for putting the link in the chat. So MCAP actually was established in 2008. We were formed by a small group of leaders at the University of Minnesota, local, state, and federal government, and private partners, as well as our NGOs in the state. And we started meeting to support increased awareness and investments in climate adaptation in Minnesota. We've organized a number of annual conferences in the state. We host climate adaptation awards to support leadership across Minnesota, as well as hosting a monthly webinar series to enhance learning and understanding about climate adaptation across the state. And we've engaged thousands of researchers, practitioners, elected officials, and community members in dialogue around climate impacts and adaptation actions. And then more formally in the last few years, with the support of the University of Minnesota Extension and the College of Food, Agricultural, and Natural Resource Sciences here at the U, we're expanding that vision and developing a portfolio of work to help communities and landscapes prepare and thrive in a changing climate. So you can see in the center diagram, we have a robust leadership and program support structure. We have an applied climate research and technical assistance team, and that's kind of on the CFANS as the acronym there with our alphabet soup, that are doing that research that then helps to inform the work of the extension educators who are really out on the landscape across the state of Minnesota, each with a different focus area around agricultural, natural resources, forestry. We are partnering with the USDA Climate Hub to co-hire a tribal and agricultural extension educator in climate resilience. And so really we have this broad group of folks with our leadership team, the applied researchers and technical assistance support, as well as our extension educators, taking the knowledge that we're gaining through the research that's being done at the university and applying that out across the state. With the extension educators on the ground. We're working to build peer-to-peer networks and share best practices. We'll be hosting the upcoming Midwest Climate Resilience Conference in Duluth next week. I mentioned earlier the Climate Adaptation Awards. We have been hosting that since 2014, I believe was the year, and championing climate literacy and action across the state. So I only had a couple of quick minutes to give an introduction, but I'll look forward to seeing many of you at the Midwest section of this Climate Service Providers Academy on October the 31st, so I can share more about MCAP and the work that we're doing along with my partner, Ariana Laxo, who is with HGA, and some of the partnerships that we're hosting with architects and engineers. Thank you, Mia.
Thank you, Amanda. Next is Glisa.
Great. Thanks, Mia. So my name is Jenna Jorns, and I'm the co-director for GLISA, the Great Lakes CAPRISA team. I'm based out of the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. GLISA was established in 2010 as a collaboration between the University of Michigan and Michigan State University, and we're currently housed at the School for Environment and Sustainability. The College of Menominee Nation Sustainable Development Institute and the University of Wisconsin Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies are also partners on our team. And our team is a mix of social and physical scientists, a mix of faculty, staff, researchers, and students at those 4 partner institutions. We formally serve the Great Lakes watershed. The area is shown here in the white, inside the white outline, but in practice, we serve all 8 U.S. states that border a Great Lake, so no matter where in the state you are, as well as the province of Ontario in Canada, so the whole area is shown here in light blue. This map highlights our engagements through 2022, giving you a feel for the types of partners we work with and where. So broadly, like many of the other CAPRISA teams, we work at the boundary between climate science and decision-making, striving to enhance the capacity of Great Lakes communities to understand, plan for, and respond to climate impacts now and in the future. And we advance this mission through applied research and engagement and collaborative relationships with communities, ultimately hoping to advance equitable climate adaptation in our region. We work in a number of sectors, but partner mainly with small and medium-sized cities, tribes and indigenous communities, and agricultural producers. We have also administered a small grant program since 2011 to fund and partner with organizations in our region that have close, trusted relationships with communities and can help us bridge that gap between science and decision-making. And like Rachel and Sean mentioned, one of those small grants went to ASAP in 2019 to pilot the framework for this academy. So we're really thrilled to see it scale up to more regions in the US. And I look forward to sharing more with you about GLISA's tools and resources at the Midwest session on October 31st. I will not be in costume, but I will be joined by my colleague Teal Harrison of Adaptation International, GLISA's private sector partner, and he will talk about our long-term collaboration to partner with communities to complete stormwater vulnerability assessments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Next are our friends at the California Nevada Adaptation Program.
Great. Thank you all so much. My name is Ariel Chenard, and I'm the program coordinator for CNAP. I think what's really interesting about CNAP is that our focus is on convening and connecting the researchers and scientists that we work with community members to co-produce research and solutions. Our mission is to improve resilience in California and Nevada by providing decision makers usable climate information through integrating cutting edge physical and social science. But it's that center of co-production with our frontline communities that is really the heart of our work. Our projects are new this year, and we have several starting into 2024. And our multidisciplinary team is going to focus on our region's kind of acute climate impacts. So we're talking about extreme heat, wildfire smoke, coastal flooding, water scarcity, and mental health. And we have 6 core research projects that are working with community partners to leverage our local knowledge and promote equitable adaptation here. I also want to mention that on Thursday, November 2nd, we're going to be presenting alongside Eagle Rock Analytics. We'll be talking about the Cal Adapt tool, and our lovely friend Kara Odegaard, who's going to talk about her use of the Climate Toolbox in developing the City of Spokane Sustainability Action Plan. So look forward to talking to you all more then.
Thank you so much, Ariel. Next are our friends at the Caribbean Climate Adaptation Network.
Hello, Maria. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Pablo.
Yeah, Berkeley, I'm Pablo Mendez Lázaro. I work at the University of Puerto Rico Medical Science Campus, and I'm the lead principal investigator of the Caribbean Climate Adaptation Network. Can you go to the next slide? Sorry, Maria. It's not that long, only like 3. Okay, so we are like 12 different institutions working together addressing climate change issues by bringing together a multidisciplinary team of universities, agencies, and non-governmental organizations based mainly in the U.S. Caribbean region, but also some of them that are in the continental U.S. Can you go to the next slides? Our main goal is obviously to work on a knowledge action network that is designed to help build adaptive capacities in the Caribbean. We are using a human-centered design, which means that we start working by the people most affected by the problem to be solved. That could be impacted communities, but also government stakeholders and others, NGOs. The idea is to develop and to co-design and co-produce community climate adaptation capacities, strategies, and actions that build a collective produce insights and realistic local problem scenarios. Can we go to the next slide, Maria, please? We are working at 3 different levels. At the macro level, what we call the macro level, because we have a powerful resource that we can link also knowledge and learn from other islands in the Caribbean region, working at the region with other islands, as I mentioned. The meso level, which is mainly working directly between Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands. Virgin Islands is composed by 3 different islands, San Thomas, San Croix, and San John, and in the case of Puerto Rico, the main island of Puerto Rico, and Culebras and Vieques. And then we're also working at the micro level with the municipalities and also community-based organizations in both territories. Next slide. So yes, on November 9, you will receive more information of what we are able to do, the amount of resource and the kind of resource available that we have in our network, and other collaborators that we have. Thank you, Maria. I think that short and sweet.
Thank you so much, Pablo. All right, next we have our friends at the South Central Climate Adaptation Science Center.
Thanks, Mia. I'm Sharon Hausum, and I am a climate adaptation planner and research scientist on the social science side at the South Central CASC. And we really appreciate being part of this Climate Service Providers Academy as a CASC. The CASCs are under the Department of the Interior, and we are often partners with the CAPRISAs, but not the same as the CAPRISAs. There are 9 of us And the South Central cast covers Oklahoma, New Mexico, Louisiana, and Texas. We're based in Norman, Oklahoma, but we've got folks stationed throughout the region. And the casks are made up of one host university and then a consortium of other universities. And also in our case, we have two tribal nations, the Chickasaw Nation and the Choctaw Nation, who are also members of the South Central Cask Consortium. Our mission is to provide decision makers with the science, tools, and information they need to address the impacts of climate variability and change on their areas of responsibility. And we, under Department of the Interior, are also under the U.S. Geological Survey. We work a lot with other interior agencies, but we also have special relationships and services to tribes and indigenous peoples within the region. And we are partnering with Skip, who I believe will have the next slide for the South Central regional session.
Thank you, Sharon. That was a pretty great segue right there. So our friends at Skip.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. My name is Vincent Brown, and I'm an assistant professor of research in the Department of Geography and Anthropology at Louisiana State University, or LSU. I'm a climatologist, but I also serve as the research director of the Southern Climate Impacts Planning Program, or SCIP. SCIP has been the South Central CAP-RISA team since 2008, and we serve the states of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana, as pictured there. Our mission, very similar to the other CAP-RISA teams, and simply put, it's to help build resilience to weather and climate extremes now and in the future. With our team, to accomplish this, we collaboratively work with stakeholders to understand decision-making processes, we research weather and climate hazards in an effort to advance the current state of knowledge, and we also help translate existing knowledge and research to some of our stakeholders. Our team's pretty unique because roughly 50% of the team is located at the University of Oklahoma. The other 30% is down with us at LSU. And then the last 2 quarters are split between Adaptation International and Texas Sea Grant. We leverage a lot of partnerships across the region. As you just saw, we partnered up with the South Central Climate Adaptation Science Center. We're pretty close with the state climate offices in Oklahoma and Louisiana, the Southern Regional Climate Center, which is now at Texas A&M. And we have a bunch of other partners at the local, state, and national levels. So SCIP, we are in our 4th phase, and in this phase, which ends in 2026, we have 4 research themes. The first research, they're depicted there in that cool little wheel. One of the first themes is climate-informed planning, and in that section, we focus on collaborating with stakeholders to incorporate climate information in their planning processes, all in an effort to build long-term resilience. The second theme is developing governance and collaborative capacity. The goal there is to help stakeholders identify levers that they can use in response to extreme events. So, for example, identifying funding opportunities, solutions, looking at things like building codes, things they can leverage when extreme events happen. Third, that's the theme that I lead and Dr. Barry Keim and I work on. It's extreme events in a changing climate. That's where we partner up with stakeholders and do stakeholder-driven research. Very simple example is we're working with a bunch of water utilities and engineering firms and recreating past extreme rainfall events and providing high-resolution spatial temporal data sets that they can then feed into their hydrologic models to identify areas that flood and all that fun stuff. And then finally, our last theme is climate justice, and in there we explore the disproportionate impacts of climate change on underrepresented populations and make sure that their voices are heard and incorporated into the decision-making process. We're super excited about our upcoming session. In that, I'm going to go over and talk about a bunch of our really cool tools, show you how to work on what kind of information you can get from that, and then also talk a little bit about how you can work with us and we can provide you with even more cool tools and expertise. So excited to be here. Thanks for listening and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Vincent. Next, we'll hear from Marisa.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Lena Easton Calabria, and I'm the program manager for the Mid-Atlantic. We still call Marisa. And I'm also a policy analyst at the RAND Corporation, where Marisa is housed. I wanted to make sure to put a list here that you can see of our partnership institutions. So all of us together make up Marisa. And our CAPRISA was established in 2016. So our first 5-year grant ran through 2021, and we started our second 5-year grant just a couple of years ago, or 2022. I've joined the team, 3-ish years ago, and really enjoy working and getting to know the entire CAPRISA network. We're really excited to meet more folks through participating here, and really looking forward to our session with you all. This map you can see here is our region where we work. We changed some of the colors so it's easier to see the state outlines, but you can see we work in Virginia, Maryland, West Virginia, Washington, D.C., Delaware, Pennsylvania, and parts of West Virginia, parts of New York. So we're very much in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and that's our focus. And as part of Marisa 2.0, as we call it, which is our second 5-year grant from NOAA, we also began to focus specifically in Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and coastal Virginia and rural Virginia. And in those areas and across the region, we really focus on a number of different climate challenges that occur. We work everywhere from green infrastructure and environmental justice in Baltimore. We have stormwater modeling going on in Pittsburgh. There's a focus on both inland flooding and coastal flooding. For example, coastal flooding is a huge issue in rural communities in Virginia. So our work really spans our region and is very diverse depending on the needs that we find. During our regional session with you all, we're going to be partnering with or presenting with CC Run, who I think Dan's going after me, and we'll introduce CC Run. But we're really going to have 2 focuses. One is our work on community climate resilience. So we're going to go over our small grants program that I think a couple of the CAPRISA folks have already mentioned. And then we're also going to do an overview of our more traditional climate services, our tools, and that type of thing. So we're really looking forward to it. I can't wait to meet you all, and really looking forward to, getting to know you all better. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. And last but not least, we have CC Run.
Thanks. My name is Dan Bader. I'm the program manager of CC Run, the Consortium for Climate Risk in the Urban Northeast. I'm also a climate scientist at Columbia University, which is the lead organization for CC Run. We're a partnership of 6 institutions, and our geographic scope is the urban corridor running from Philadelphia up through New York City and then onward to Boston. If you've ever driven up Interstate 95 from Philly to Boston, that's kind of our region and the surrounding metropolitan areas as well. We're unique in that we're the only CAPRISA team that has a principal focus on urban and peri-urban settings. We first received our award in 2010, which is when I first started working on the project. And now we're in our 3rd phase, which is really focused on deepening and broadening the knowledge base for regional integrated climate resilience in the urban Northeast. Our work is divided across different topical areas. We focus on 5 key adaptation challenges: actionable climate risk information, evaluation of adaptation, equity and justice, coordinated cross-sale, and then integration of mitigation and adaptation. In recent years, our work has really shifted focus from primarily working with the local municipal governments of the 3 big cities in the region to now some of the smaller to medium-sized cities, and now really focus on neighborhoods and local communities, frontline neighborhoods throughout the region. And in our session, which is on November 16th, as Lena mentioned, we're partnering with the Marisa group. We're going to focus on both traditional climate services and also some of the community climate resilience work that's been going on not only in the Northeast, but the broader Mid-Atlantic region. So thanks. I look forward to it.
Thank you, Daniel. With that, we just want to extend a huge thank you to all of our Academy partners, a special shout out to our regional partners, all of who just presented. And with that, we're going to start wrapping up this section with final reflections and questions. So with that, we really encourage you all to reflect today. What were some, aha moments that you had during some of the presentations? What was something you're curious about that wanted to explore in the rest of the academy? We really encourage you all to reflect upon the session. And if you have any questions, we encourage you to put those in the chat or feel free to email me. That's my personal email down at the bottom of the screen, mdozier@adaptpros, supposed to say .org. I just came from, university space, so excuse the edu, but it's actually mdozier@adaptpros.org, and I can put that in the chat as well. But yeah, we really want to encourage you all to use the Slack. That's our main mode of communication with you all between sessions, but feel free to email us otherwise. Next slide. So in addition to that, we also have worksheets available that are optional, of course, but those are designed to extend your learning that you'll receive in the Academy during our sessions. The next worksheet will be worksheet 2. You should have received worksheet 1 already, but worksheet 2 is designed to extend your learning for after this opening session, in between this and the next session, which will be our Principles of Quality Adaptation Practice. We want to encourage you to also sign up for a one-on-one consultation with any of our regional partners or any of the ACEP staff if you're, curious or have additional questions that you want to be answered in more of a conversational way. We encourage you to do that as well. Again, connect on Slack, and then also really want to emphasize that we're seeking facilitators for small group activities for next week's session. We're looking for 7 enthusiastic folks. You do not need to be an expert, but if you're interested and have a little bit of experience facilitating group discussions, we would love to have you join as a facilitator for a small group activity. A couple of those that are happening during our next week's session, Principles of Quality Adaptation Practice. I believe Eliza just dropped the form to sign up in the chat. Next slide. Yes, and that is all that we have for you today. Want to give a shout out to all of our presentations today, all of the people, all of our partners who joined us. Just thank you all for coming. Extend immense gratitude to all of you as well.